Welcome to DIY guitar making. Sorry guys, just having a little fun there. Today, we're just going to be doing Q&A. I am mired in batch prepping right now. So that's just batching out parts, doing kind of tedious mill work. It's not very interesting from a camera perspective, so I decided today I'm just not going to do the demonstration after the Q&A, just because the things I'm doing today aren't all that instructive or interesting. So we'll just do your questions and let's get started right now. Alright, and so the first question comes to us from Brian Walters, and actually this is 3 questions all in one, which yeah, I'll answer all 3 questions. Sometimes when someone just kind of loads up a question with back-to-back many questions, I don't always like to answer them all because it's not fair to, you know, everyone else to, you get it. Okay. Eric, I am a knife maker. I also play drums and some guitar. Cool, man. I grew up playing drums also, so I play drums and guitar. Also, I can relate to that. Love playing the drums. I don't get to play them that much anymore. It's a hard hobby to have, especially if you haven't hopped onto the train of the more modern electronic drum kit thing. I'm still playing, you know, my old Thomas Star Classic kit that I got in, I don't know, like 7th or 8th grade. But anyway, it's a hard hobby to have because they're loud. I have kids now, and who's got the time? But I love it. I also play drums and some guitar. I am a knife maker who has recently gotten into guitar making and have found your tutorials very helpful. A couple I have watched brought up some questions. Last week I watched your video on woods and their tonal quality. It helped clear up for me some of the muddy views about this. I agree with your viewpoint. I'm not sure which video you watched. I'm kind of assuming, because everyone tends to see this video and comment on it, it's the video about electric guitar tone woods, which is very controversial. I actually don't talk about that video very much or bring up that viewpoint too often anymore because people get real kind of crazy there. But anyway, I'm assuming that's the video you're talking about. The question I have, if you'll excuse my snarkiness, the question I have is, what kind of tonal qualities do plastic pickguards add or subtract to the sound? So plastic pickguards, and I don't read any snarkiness into that, so I don't know where you were going with that. I don't think it sounds snarky. I think it's a very nice, very legitimate question. So plastic pickguards, so it's plastic. You know, you're putting essentially like a very small wet blanket onto your guitar in the same way that a finish is like a very thin wet blanket hugging your guitar. So with the plastic pickguard, you're adding more of that dampening onto the resonant membrane, which is your top. So from a technical perspective, it's not a good thing. It is a subtractive thing. It takes away from the resonance, so you're going to lose, again, technically, you're going to lose sustain. But just to sort of clarify what I'm talking about here, I actually have some Mylar Pickguard material. You can get this from Stu Mac, and it's really just so it's hard to measure here because there's a backing behind the adhesive on this, so I'm measuring both the pickguard and the backing here, and it's 12 thousandths of an inch, but the backing makes up, looks like, more than half of that thickness. So really, in the best case, getting, you know, a good, thin, clear, translucent pickguard, you're only putting a couple thousandths of an inch. You know, in the end, I don't know, it might only be like 0.03 of an inch or something like that. I don't know. I'd have to peel some of this off and measure it, which it's fine. I'm not going to do that. They're very thin. They're not all the same though. So I think those, you know, like tortoloid, older vintage pickguards tend to be thicker, and so you're going to have more of that effect, obviously depending on how thick the pickguard is. But so yeah, so technically it's a subtractive thing, but in actual practice I've never noticed, I haven't actually A/B tested it or anything, but I've never noticed any difference, pickguard or no pickguard. And another thing to just throw in the back of your mind here is the fact that if you look around at some of the greatest builders, Irvin Samaji, Matsuda, Jason Costal, all of these guys, you look at their guitars, if you find, you know, are lucky enough to find a showroom or something that has those guitars, they have pickguards on them. And of course they have them on them because, you know, people are going to play them. You don't want to ruin a masterpiece like that. But they're doing it, so it must not be a big deal, right? So yeah, I wouldn't overread into that, but technically it's subtractive. Now I'll read the second part of his question here. Secondly, I noticed that the headstocks on your number 56 and number 57 builds are arranged in a 4-2 configuration. They're not, but we'll get to that in a moment. I have heard that Ernie Ball has a patent on this design. Is this true? And if so, have you run into any issues with it? So I wanted to highlight this question simply because I hadn't heard of this 4-2 configuration patent, and it's just kind of interesting, and I wanted to talk about it. First, real quick, just as an aside, this is one of the guitars that he's talking about. This is number 56, and if you look at the headstock here, I'm not even really sure why he thought this looked like a 4-2. First of all, because it's Steinberger's, technically, actually, it's 0. It's does not apply. It's not really one side or the other. It's actually all the tuners are in the back, so it's kind of a novel arrangement in that way. But even if these weren't Steinberger's, when I load these up with Goto 510 minis, which I like to use, it's still 3-3. It's 1, 2, 3, the tuners stick out this way, and 1, 2, 3, the treble tuners stick out down here. I can kind of see why it might look like a 2, 4, but it's not even 2 plus 4, let alone 4 plus 2. And let's talk about that plus thing, because it's interesting. Some of you guys might not know what I'm talking about. Actually, I'm going to pull a different guitar out, just for the sake of explanation. When I say plus, although because of the Steinbergers, these guitars aren't very helpful for explanation in this case, but I'll try anyway. So typically, guitars, most commonly you have 6 in a line, which is like a Fender headstock. You know, electric guitars often have 6 in the line. And then you have 3 plus 3, which is also very common, which of course is just 3 to a side. So if you're buying, this matters if you're buying tuners, especially if you're modding some existing guitar, you want to make sure that, say, if it's a Fender style headstock, that you get 6 in a line and not 3 plus 3, right? Because if you get those 3 plus 3 tuners thinking you're going to put them on your Fender headstock, you're going to have 3 of them that are facing one direction and 3 that are facing the other direction. And what I'm talking about is the knobs that stick out. They'll face one way as opposed to the other. And what Ernie Ball does is their tuners, they have 4 that are, I guess we'll just call them righties, right-handed, and 2 that are left-handed. Anyway, it's just interesting, and I looked it up, and the patent does exist, and my question would be, how often, if ever, do they enforce this patent? Because in my mind, there's 2 reasons to get a patent. You might get a patent and do nothing with it. The reason you got the patent is simply to protect yourself in the event that, say, some other asshole comes along and takes your design, they get a patent on it, and then they turn around and sue you for using their design. That would suck. But that's a very defensible reason for getting a patent. It makes sense. I can respect that. But then there's the other side, which is, hey, we're going to get a patent to prevent anyone and everyone from doing something that would otherwise be, I don't know, something that they could come up with on their own, like a 4-2 layout. There's a million different ways that you could, on your own, without being some genius, come up with, hey, instead of doing 3 plus 3, why don't we do 4 on one side, 2 on the other? And your design, of course, might look radically different from Ernie Ball's manifestation of that layout, right? You'll just come up with something different and you'll have come up with it on your own. But because they've patented it, maybe you can't use it. But anyway, I'm not attacking Ernie Ball here. I'm just curious if they enforce that patent or they're just sitting on it to keep themselves secure. Maybe you guys know more than I do about that, perhaps, and I'd love to hear about it in the comments if you guys know if they've had lawsuits in the past. Just a fun question. All right, let's move on to the next one. Or I'm sorry, the last part of his question. Third, I am particularly fond of the design of 56 and 57, a la Samaji Matsuda. Yeah, a la Samaji Matsuda. It's funny because when you first said the Ernie Ball thing, I was almost, the Ernie Ball part of your question, I was almost a little bit offended. Just, being compared to the Ernie Ball design. But then you really pulled it back here, and now I'm flattered to the point of feeling like I don't deserve it. So, even mentioning Samaji and Matsuda in the same sentence as me there is, again, too flattering, and I don't deserve it. Those guys are, if you guys don't know, Irvin Samaji is like the legend of all legends in the guitar maker world, and Matsuda, Michihiro Matsuda, is an apprentice of Samaji who has really taken, everything that Samaji has done, which is genius, and he has just evolved it to something totally different. You can still see the influence of Samaji in there, but Matsuda is like just an evolved version of Samaji. It's really, if you've never looked up his work, just for a little bit of eye candy, get on Google and look up some of his guitars. Incredible stuff. But anyway, I don't deserve that comparison, not even slightly. Let's continue the question here. Hold on, my phone is acting up. Okay. I'm particularly fond of the design, but have not been able to locate a plan. Can you direct me to a source for this? So that's my design, and I don't make plans, unfortunately. It's simply because I don't know how to make plans. I don't have AutoCAD software. It's just not something that I do. Even when I draw up plans for myself and for my own purposes, they're always, I'm only ever drawing up enough for what I need to get through the project, if that makes sense. When a plan is drawn up for commercial purposes, say to sell to other people, they'll be very detailed. When I draw something up, I'll literally just be, drawing up the dimensions that I need to figure out, say, a neck angle on a new scale length that I'm trying. And that's it. All right, so let me give you a little bit of background on this next question. We had been, in previous episodes here, we had been discussing radii the radii of the back and top plate. Someone had asked basically if they could build guitars with no radius just for simplicity. I said no, and the lengthy explanation ensued. And this question is now following up with that. Hymn Player writes, thanks for the video. I have read somewhere that James Olson builds his guitars with a true flat top. His building methods must compensate somehow. Yeah, I wanted to bring this up because I looked this up to see if I could find any information on this. I didn't know that James Olson did that, and I don't know if he does. I would be surprised if any big name, well-respected builder builds with a truly flat top. And that's, again, for the reasons that I mentioned in the previous video, which is that it's a very unstable situation and your top is very likely to become sunken in some way, which leads to all kinds of problems. But maybe his building methods do compensate somehow for that, and that would be just an interesting thing to know and to talk about and to discuss, because James Olson, if you guys haven't heard of him, is a very well-respected guitar maker. He builds about 60 guitars a year, which for an individual guitar maker is a lot. It might not sound like a lot to some of you guys who are just getting started in this or who are just curious about guitar making, but 60 a year is prolific. Okay? But yeah, this is another question that I'm really kicking out to you guys. Have you guys heard of this? James Olson building with a 0 radius, or really any builders building with a truly flat top? Let's make that discussion happen in the comments. Next question. Okay, this one's from Keith Short. Keith writes, hey Eric, and this is still on the same theme, by the way, of radii. Ukuleles have dead flat fronts and spherical backs. No radius on the front, but similar thickness as a guitar. They get away with this because nylon strings have lower tension than steel strings, and the shorter length and width reduces the bending moment and deflection of the front in the bridge area. I have nothing to add to that. That is, I just wanted to share that. That is perfectly correct and well stated, Keith. And thanks for sharing that with us, because I didn't mention, I didn't bring up other instruments beyond the guitar where the differences that I'm talking about don't exist, right? So the ukulele is a good example of something, of a stringed instrument that is built with a truly flat soundboard. Walter Ryder writes, let me see, hold on, there's a lot in here. Let me find the question. Oh, there isn't a question. This is another comment that I just wanted to share with you guys. This was on the video I did recently where I broke a bandsaw blade and I showed you guys how to replace a bandsaw blade. Yep, it is easy to break them. I had a storm run through our subdivision, so lots of trees got dropped. I harvested them for my use as boards: pear, plum, oak, and birch. Nice, man. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's a cool steal there to get those that stash of wood. Okay, and what he's saying is, I broke several blades pushing too hard. I used an angle grinder to resharpen the face of the blades. 131.5-inch blades took about 18 minutes. Yeah, that's actually 18 minutes to do that. That sounds sounds pretty good to me. That's not a lot of time to resharpen up your bandsaw blades. So good on you. And I just wanted to share that because he's giving you guys a great tip for something you can do with your own bandsaw blades. You don't have to do what I do, which is just simply buy new ones when they break and, just simply replace them when they get dull, because I don't sharpen my bandsaw blades. But you can actually sharpen them, and a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people forget that, and he uses an angle grinder to do it. So thanks, Walter. Oh, and he asks, what is the size and make and horsepower of your little bandsaw? So it's a Jet, it's a 10-inch. I'm not sure what the horsepower is on the motor. It's right here. So let me go check it out. It is a 0.5 horsepower motor. Okay, another question from, it might be, actually it's a comment again. A lot of these are comments today, guys. Another comment from Keith Short. Bandsaw blades break. I don't think this reflects on your technique of sawing. Keeping the guides low helps keep fingers where they belong. That is so important for fretting and picking. Yes, guys, let's keep our fingers on our hands so we can still play the guitars we build. Going on with his comment. I have little confidence in built-in tension gauges. The Alex Snodgrass press on the blade and assess deflection. Let me say that again. The Alex Snodgrass press on the blade and assess deflection method works okay. Yes, that was something I was talking about in the previous video with the bandsaw blade, where you can press on that bandsaw blade to check the deflection, and it's very much a feel thing. A lot of people will say if you raise the guide up 6 inches and press, a good deflection test there is to get about a 1/4 inch of deflection. It's so vague, though, for beginners with the bandsaw that it's almost not helpful. I remember hearing this when I first started out, and you know, you think, okay, bring the guide up, press it in, 1/4 inch, but really you're just kind of, it's hard to say because you don't have a good solid point of reference whether you're pressing in a 1/4 inch, and it's hard to say because you can always press harder, you know? So you're pressing gently in, but my gentle might be different than somebody else's. So it's really one of those helpful tricks that is not so helpful if you don't have the experience and muscle memory behind it. So I just wanted to make that comment about the deflection test. I kind of use it sometimes, but I understand why it's not that helpful for beginners. But then he talks about something else that is a good method of setting up your bandsaw blade for the uninitiated. Okay, I'll go on. The lower tension till it oscillates, then tighten it slightly method has merit also, as reduced tension prolongs the fatigue life. So he calls it the lower tension till it oscillates, then tighten it method. I've heard this called the Flutter Method. And what it is simply you, just to put the idea in a nutshell, there's some details to it you might want to look up. But the idea is that you lower the tension until when it runs, the bandsaw blade flutters. And you can actually do this while the machine is running. You tighten up the blade until it stops fluttering. And that's sort of your sweet spot right there. Now you have to lift up the guides and everything to allow it to flutter in the first place. And then once it's tightened up so it's not fluttering anymore, you can put those guides back into position. But if you want to look up the Flutter Method, if you're struggling with your bandsaw tension, which a lot of people do, look up the Flutter Method, try it out. Okay. That's it. We're done. And we're not doing any, well, I'm doing some guitar making stuff back here. But again, it's not all that interesting. It's batch processing. I don't want to bore you guys to tears. So we're just going to end it right here, right now. I've got lots to do. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.